And now we're just going to go over some college terminology. You will be hearing of these words over and over again. And they can be a little confusing. So it's good to kind of just go over them right now.
First, we have the admission plans for different universities. So there's two main categories, which is the early schools and the regular decision schools. So within the early schools, which are before or like November deadlines, so you have EA, which is early action, REA, which is restrictive early action, and then ED1, which is early decision, and ED2, which is early decision 2. So to start with early decision, this is a school that if you apply early decision to a school and you get into that school, you have to go there. So it's a binding agreement. So it should really be your top choice and you should really want to go there because if you get in, you have to. And most of these deadlines are in November 1st, around then. And so if they require SAT scores, again, you should make sure you send them really early and right way before November 1st. And then you have early action schools. So this is a school that you would apply to around the November 1st deadline. But if you get in, you don't have to go. So this is a good way, especially if you want to get in some safety schools there and have a school in the bag, which is super nice and really uplifting, especially during this entire process. And then you have restrictive early action. So there's only 4 schools that do this, which is Harvard, Stanford, Princeton, and Yale. And I know I think Princeton and Yale aren't doing it for 2021 year. So if you're applying this year, you can't REA there, but Stanford still is. So this is a school that it's not binding. So if you get in there, you don't have to go, but you can only apply to one private school early. So if you apply to Stanford early, you wouldn't be able to apply to Caltech early or any other school. But you could do public schools. So you could still apply to UIUC early or Purdue early. And then you have regular decision schools. So this is like where the bulk of your applications are going to be. And they're all January deadlines with the exception of UC's, which is the most notable. It's November 30th. And then some schools will have scholarship deadlines, which are earlier. For example, USC has a December 1st deadline, and that's still regular decision. But yeah, you can apply to as many schools as you want regular decision, and there's no limit on that.
These are the most traditional school deadlines, you could say. Other schools, like art schools, for example, their deadlines are like in February, March, or like even earlier. And so it really depends on what your plans are, you know. Some schools also have rolling admissions, so you can apply at any time. I think until a certain date, and you have a chance to get accepted and hear back as soon as possible. But those are just like the more like traditional college approach. You should obviously just research like terminology yourself and like what the deadlines are according to our plans. But moving on from that, like more on timeline, here's what we recommend for like this summer. It's a little bit late right now because it's like August and almost September, but we just kind of want to go over like the main plan that you should have. So July, a little outdated, but still, you know, still applies now if you haven't gotten much ahead like in your college applications process. So the first thing is obviously to have like a college list. This really kind of forms like your entire college application process. If you're applying to a lot of schools, this will not be a fun time for you. If you're applying to very few schools, you can, you know, like relax a little bit, chill. But like to create any of these school lists, regardless of the number of schools, what you want to do is use a lot of online resources such as Naviance, the school software that you have, Google, and this doesn't necessarily mean just looking at rankings. That is not at all a good way to form your college list. I'll talk about that in a little bit, as well as like college websites to compile like a preliminary college list. And this should consider, and while making this list, you should consider your reaches, targets, and safeties. To clarify, reaches are like the dream schools. The way that I thought about my reaches were those schools that had less than 20% acceptance rate. That's really low, right? And like no matter how amazing of an applicant you are, it is hard to get into these schools. So I always consider them as my reaches. Then you have the target schools that are kind of in the middle. And these are schools that you kind of expect to get into based on your stats, based on like location, because obviously some states, you know, they have preference for in-state applicants. So like you basically consider a bunch of factors and you think, oh, like I can probably get into the school. So that would be a target. Then you have the safety, which is like I most definitely can, if I play my cards right and do my application to the best of my ability, get into this school. And so these, typically have higher acceptance rates. And the purpose of having like a good balance of these, and you should also, before I go into that, you should have more targets and safeties and then reaches. It's hard to get into reaches, and especially with COVID-19, like distance, is going to play a factor into all this. So you want to be strategic about how many schools that you have in each of these categories. And it's good to have safeties because I think a lot of people, like I mentioned, we're from the Bay Area, so it's like kind of a competitive environment. We all like going to like the top schools. And a lot of people don't really focus that much on safeties, but even when you're considering each of these colleges, the colleges that end up in your college list should all be colleges that you would be interested in seriously going, including your safeties. All these, like, honestly, there's no such thing as a bad college, but there can be a not like a good fit of a college for you. So you want to make sure every single college on your list is something that you'd be excited about going to. Then you have the application fees. This is something you definitely need to consider. Unfortunately, applying to college is a privilege in itself. And like you have, for every single college that you apply to, you have to pay a little. You obviously have fee waivers, but I don't know like the whole like application process for that, if you qualify or not. So this is something you want to consider, especially with how uncertain times are right now in the economy and COVID-19. So consider this for sure. So this should also play a role in how big or how small your college list is. Then when it comes to more personal preferences, you want to consider how you like the location, the size, the general vibe of the college. I know earlier on, I really wanted to go to a East Coast college or out of California in general. So most of my schools that I applied to, they were all on the East Coast, and I was happy with that. That was something that I really wanted. So consider that for sure. You're not just going to this college as, it's not just school. It's not like high school. You don't really have a choice. If you live in an area, you go to the high school. That's not how college is. You play a role in this. So you want to make sure that you're living in a place that you seriously enjoy. Then you have to consider if you'll actually realistically go to that college if you're expected. Kind of touches back on the first point that I made about every single college on your list being a college that you're passionate about. But yeah, like every single college that you list, you have a chance of getting in there. So it should be something that you're passionate about attending. Then consider your financial situation. This is probably the most important takeaway here. If accepted, can you afford to go to that college? But I think nothing would hurt more than finding out that you got into your dream school, but the tuition is so like large and it's like so expensive that you just can't afford to go there, right? So consider your financial situation. That also means applying to scholarships, but that's later on in the timeline. But like the main takeaway here is you want to really start focusing on compiling your college list. This is so important. I was so bad and I didn't really pay that much attention to this, but this is something you really want to get like ahead on as soon as possible. Then also you want to start brainstorming for your essays. These are definitely going to take the most time during this whole journey. So you want to start brainstorming essay topics for the Common App, the UCs, the Coalition, whatever apps you're applying for. Start thinking about your art portfolios, your research portfolios, your music portfolios. Start getting all those pieces together. And if time permits, also brainstorm essay topics for the supplemental prompts. These usually don't change from year to year. Schools typically officially release them in like early August. But it's not a bad idea at all to look over previous prompts and see what ideas you can get just by visiting a college's website. So that's July.
Yeah, so now for August and September, like this is where we are right now, so it could be very applicable to you. As soon as school starts, really make sure to, again, like be accountable for yourself, solidify your letters of rec, including your non-teacher writers, anyone from outside actually could end up being more complicated and give you like panic later down the road if you can't figure that out. Make sure to solidify your college list so that you can make changes later on. Make sure you have a very good general idea, and so that you can enter them into Naviance, give them to your teachers who require a college list, anything to make the process easier for your letters of rec writers as well as yourself. Also, make sure to invite your teachers to submit their letters of rec on Naviance. There's certain settings that makes it so that you can input their email, and then they'll already have like what colleges they need to send it to, and it'll just make it a lot easier on everyone. Make sure to work on your SSRs. In 2019, which was the year that we applied, they were due 2 weeks after school began. So it was just like, bam, new school year, and then there's already a deadline. So really make sure that you're on top of that. It's nothing to really freak out about. It's not too much work, but it can really sneak up on you if you don't realize it's coming. And then if you haven't started yet, you should really start writing your main essays. Prioritize which which schools you're applying to. For example, if you're EDing to a school or EAing to a school, you probably want to think about those supplementals or those essays first so that you can get a head start on those earlier deadlines. Most private colleges do release their supplemental questions around this time, and which is like early mid-August, and a lot of questions are already like out there floating on the internet and they don't really change very much. So it's pretty easy to start drafting, which is always very helpful for the process. And then this could be difficult with the current circumstances with COVID, but finish last minute testing if you can with subject tests, ACT, SAT. Of course, with the current circumstances, everything is very flexible right now, and it's totally understandable if that can't happen. But yes, that's usually how the timeline goes. And then in October, there's actually some deadlines already for schools like UNC or Georgia Tech. So you should already have those applications done by early October, hopefully. It can be very fast of a deadline to come up, so really make sure to be on top of that. And then work on your essays, especially if you have, EA, REA, ED schools, or even the UC deadline, which is at the end of November. November tends to be a very busy time for seniors and just high school students in general. So it can really sneak up on you if you think that the deadline is super far away. So again, just plan it and be on top of yourself. Continue to prioritize your mental health. Again, if there's any like events you want to attend that are, COVID safe for now, really make sure to still think about yourself and what you like to do. Not everything has to be centered around college apps. You still have a life, and it's still important to make sure that you're keeping in touch with yourself. So send your official SAT or AP score reports to schools that require it. AP score reports tend to not be required, and those are usually self-reported, but especially for SAT or schools that do require your AP scores beforehand, really make sure to send those in way before you need to. Usually it takes 1 to 2 weeks for colleges to receive and process them, but it is better to do it ahead of time in case something goes wrong, especially right now with the mailing situation. Everything could be an issue. And then also look for work on scholarship applications. They can often be like a whole nother college application. And a lot of the big ones are actually due in November, December, which is like around your other deadlines. When a lot of people do think that they are in like February or something, then they miss a lot of the bigger scholarships that they could get. So just do a little bit of research beforehand.
And then in November, December, so this is when most of your early apps are going to be in the final stages. So you have big November 1st, November 15th, November 30th deadlines. So make sure you submit those a few days before. A lot of the sites crash on the day of, so you just want to be really careful. You wouldn't want to be in a position where you're submitting your application at 11:59 on the day of the deadline, and then it crashes, and then you can't send it in. That would be unfortunate. So really make sure you don't procrastinate on those and you send them in earlier. And then second, just take a breather, take a step back. You've done a lot of work up to this point, and sometimes you just need to relax for a few days, just not worry about any college. You also want to continue adjusting your college list if necessary. SSRs deadlines are the last time you could add a college to your college list, depending on the school, but usually it's in early December. So after early December, your high school will not send the SSR to the college, meaning you wouldn't be able to apply to that school. And then realize this is your final stretch. You just have up till January, finish up your last applications, make sure you're revising your essays, put in everything you've got. Like, this is it. This is all the years you've been waiting for is coming to an end. So just give it everything you've got.